Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a sea with an army behind you and no visible path forward. The water offers no bridge, the sky offers no rescue, and your strength is all but spent. In that moment, logic fails. Hope seems like madness, and yet it is precisely there on the nigh edge of despair that the miracle comes. If you have ever found yourself in such a moment, or if you are in one now, then listen closely, not to a man, but to truth itself. For what I wish to say to you is not merely comforting, it is unshakably true. God will make a way for you to overcome your hardest moments. I beg you, don't listen as one who is merely curious. Listen as one gasping for breath on the floor of your soul. For what follows is not entertainment, it is lifeline. We do not often understand the full architecture of our suffering until much later. A child taken to a surgeon does not call the scalpel merciful, but in time the same child thanks the scar. What if, even in your pain, there is something being healed that you cannot yet name? Human strength is a beautiful but limited thing, and when it ends, something greater begins. You see, God is not a crutch for the weak. He is the architect of the impossible. Your dead ends are not dead ends to him. They are thresholds. Fire, when governed, refines. So too do hardships. They can reduce us, but they can also reveal us. Many things in us must burn away for the pure gold of our being to be found, and perhaps that is the only way. The path God makes is often not visible until we are already walking. We want bridges before steps, certainty before movement. But what if the bridge only forms under the foot that dares to step? Sometimes the way God makes is not the one we would have chosen. It does not always bring comfort first. It brings truth. It does not always remove the storm. It places us in the eye of it and teaches us to stand. When your strength fails, and it will, grace does not, you are not meant to carry everything. You are meant to lean, and when you lean on God, you will find that the weight which once crushed you now grows you. So if you find yourself tonight in the place where there is no map, where the pain is sharp and the silence loud, know this: God sees, he knows, and he will make a way. It may not come when you want it. It may not look like what you imagined, but it will come, because he is not bound by your fear, nor by your circumstance. The sea will part, the stone will roll, the dawn will break. Hold on, not because of who you are, but because of who he is. Suffering, real soul-cutting suffering, has a way of silencing all the easy answers. It strips the skin off our certainties and leaves us standing naked before the cold wind of life's harshest truths. When we are in pain, when we sit at the bedside of a dying child, or feel the hollow echo in a home after betrayal, or stare at the ceiling through tear-stained nights, philosophies collapse like scaffolding built too thin. We do not ask for explanations, we ask for meaning, and more deeply we ask, sometimes in a whisper and sometimes in a scream, is there any purpose in this? The brutal honesty of pain is that it makes us question everything. And rightly so. Pain in its most honest form is not something to be suppressed or rationalized into silence. It is something that demands to be taken seriously, and yet, even here in this raw space of anguish, there lies a glimmer of something more than despair. There is a strange whisper that speaks in the wreckage, saying, "This is not wasted." Now, this is not to say that suffering is good in itself. It is not. It is terrible. If you are hurting, do not let anyone tell you to smile through it, as if pain were just an illusion. You know better, and so does God. The story of faith does not ask you to pretend you are fine. It asks you to believe that your suffering, however senseless it feels, can still be folded into a greater story that is not senseless. It is very easy to believe in meaning when life is going well. When things align, we say, this is all part of a plan. But the real test of belief is when nothing aligns, when you pray and the heavens feel shut, When you beg for mercy, and the answer is silence, when all that you have is shattered at your feet, and you are left with nothing but the aching ache of grief, in those moments you must ask yourself, could it be that what is incomprehensible to me is not meaningless to God? There are things a child does not understand about a parent's actions. There are truths a patient cannot see while undergoing surgery. In both cases the pain is real, but so is the purpose, though hidden. We may not understand the suffering we endure, but if we believe that God is good, not simply kind, not merely tolerant, but fundamentally and furiously good, then we must allow that he may be doing something beyond our comprehension. Something we would never choose, but something we would never trade, if only we could see the end from the beginning. Perhaps the greatest evidence that suffering is not meaningless is that God himself did not exempt himself from it. If pain were only punishment, or only randomness, then why did the author of life write himself into the story as a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief? Why would he subject himself to betrayal, to injustice, to mockery, to crucifixion, unless he was trying to show us something that goes beyond words, that pain is not the end of the story, that suffering, when surrendered, can be redemptive, that the grave, though terrifying, is not final. It is an audacious thing to say that pain can be used for good, but it is not a shallow thing, because the good that suffering brings is not always visible on the surface. It's the kind of good that changes you. It doesn't make you smile, it makes you true. It does not make you louder, it makes you real. Some of the kindest, most grounded, most compassionate people you will ever meet have walked through hell and come back softer, not harder. Not because the pain made them good, but because they chose somehow to let God meet them in it. You see, pain is a door. It opens into places in us that nothing else can reach. It strips us of pretense and leaves only what is actual. And in that place, God does not lecture. He does not offer clichés. He sits beside us. He bleeds with us. And then, over time, perhaps slow, perhaps imperceptible, he begins to rebuild, not always by restoring what was lost, but by growing something deeper, something we never could have cultivated on our own. So if you are suffering right now, hear this: you are not forgotten. Your tears are not lost in the void, and though the pain feels senseless, it is not without purpose. In the hands of the one who sees farther than we ever will, nothing is wasted, not even this. It is a peculiar thing, how we come to God most earnestly only when we have come to the end of ourselves. There is a strange mercy in exhaustion, a clarity that arises when every human option has dried up, and nothing remains but the silence that follows after panic. In such moments, we no longer pretend to be strong. We are too tired for pride. We are too wounded for illusion, and it is there, in the hollow space of impossibility, that something begins to move, something not born of effort or strategy or cleverness, but of grace. We are a people addicted to control. We construct plans, forecast outcomes, calculate odds, and yet life has a way of bending all our confidence into question marks. The illness resists every treatment. The relationship defies all counsel. The debt deepens despite every sacrifice. The grief won't lift, no matter how many days we give it. And eventually we come to a place where we no longer ask, "How can I fix this?" but rather, "What now?" That question is not a surrender to despair. It is an opening to wonder. For it is precisely when all natural doors have closed that the supernatural ones begin to open. Not because God delights in our desperation, but because it is only in the silence of our striving that we can finally hear his voice. There is a way that God works which seems, to our limited vision, like delay or absence. But in truth, it is preparation, it is alignment, it is a weaving together of threads too vast for us to trace. He waits, not because he is slow, but because the miracle he is making requires a soil of complete dependence. We often say we want a miracle, but we forget what a miracle implies, that the natural order has failed us, that logic has collapsed, that we are no longer able to save ourselves. And so, if we truly desire divine help, we must be willing to live through divine tension. That uncomfortable, stretching moment when the sea has not yet parted, but the army is already closing in. It is a fearful thing to stand in that place, but it is also holy ground. In the pages of sacred history, you will not find God applauded for arriving early. You will find him glorified for arriving just in time. Abraham did not see the ram in the thicket until the knife was raised. Israel did not see the Red Sea part until they stood with their backs against it. The fourth man did not appear in the furnace until the flames were already lit. Again and again he shows us this pattern, not to frighten us, but to teach us. He is never too late. You may ask, why does God wait until everything seems impossible? Perhaps it is because our hearts do not open to true awe until all other lights have gone out. When we still think we can manage it, we do not truly seek him. But when we come to the end of every method, every solution, every hope we could manufacture, then, and only then, do we look up with the eyes of a soul that is finally honest. And it is into that honesty that God steps. His ways are not our ways. His timing is not our timing. His solutions are not always the ones we prayed for, and rarely are they the ones we expected. Sometimes he opens a door. Sometimes he brings us through a wall. Sometimes he doesn't remove the obstacle at all, but changes us so deeply that we walk over it, transformed. And sometimes impossibility itself becomes the very stage for his glory. The very thing that threatened to destroy you becomes the thing that declares him. When we say, there is no way, he does not argue, he simply makes one, a path through the sea, a stream in the desert, a child from a barren womb, a resurrection from a sealed tomb. It is not that the impossible becomes possible. It is that, in his presence, it never truly was impossible at all. So if you are staring down a wall right now, one that will not move, that will not break, that seems to laugh at your faith, then hear this: the wall is not the end. The wall is where his work begins. Do not believe the silence means absence. Do not mistake the delay for denial. You are not abandoned. You are being positioned for something greater than escape. You are being invited into a deeper kind of trust, the kind that can only grow where certainty dies. In the economy of heaven, impossibility is not a problem. It is a canvas, and when the human hand has nothing left to offer, the hand of God begins to paint. There are times when darkness feels so complete, so suffocating, that it seems impossible to believe that anything good could come from it. When you are in the midst of it, when joy has vanished, when your identity feels unanchored, when the questions in your soul outnumber the answers, you do not ask for growth, you ask for escape, you ask for rescue. You ask to be lifted out of the pain, but rarely do we consider that the rescue may come not through escape, but through transformation, and even more strangely, that transformation may only be possible because of the darkness itself. We are taught to value strength, clarity, and victory. These are the marks, we think, of a life well lived, but God seems to favor a different classroom, one where the lessons are carved not in comfort, but in crisis. One where the soul is not simply improved, but remade. And this remaking, as anyone who has lived it knows, is not gentle. It is holy, but it is not painless. It is in the darkest hours that all our pretenses fall away. We can no longer hide behind busyness, reputation, or outward confidence. In suffering, you are reduced to what is real. You are no longer who you appear to be. You are who you are, and that confrontation, as brutal as it may feel, is strangely liberating. Because in that emptiness there is finally room for something new to be built. You see, transformation does not require fullness. It requires surrender, and surrender often only comes when we are too tired to fight. God is not interested in merely polishing our behavior. He is not a divine therapist looking to help us feel a bit better about ourselves. He is an artist, a craftsman, a refiner, and the raw material he works with most powerfully is a broken heart. Not because he delights in our suffering, but because there are certain kinds of beauty that can only emerge from that soil. The seeds of compassion, of wisdom, of empathy. These do not grow in the sunlight of ease. They grow in the night. Think of how the earth functions. The richest soil is often the result of things that have died, decayed, and broken down. The death of one thing makes life possible for another. And so it is with the soul. The death of our pride may give birth to humility. The collapse of our dreams may make space for a greater purpose. The loss we thought would destroy us becomes the very thing that deepens us. None of this means that the pain itself is good. It is not. Loss is still loss. Grief is still grief. But what it means is this: even what was meant to destroy you can be used to remake you, and the remaking is not random. It is precise, intentional, and infused with love. Sometimes it is only through the collapse of everything familiar that we finally begin to ask the deeper questions. Who am I, really? What matters when everything else is gone? What remains when nothing else holds me together? The answers to those questions are not found in books or sermons alone. They are written in the lived language of the dark night. The people who have emerged from such nights are rarely the same as those who entered. They speak with quieter voices, but deeper ones. They do not need to prove much anymore. They are not dazzled by shallow success. They are rooted, not perfect, not unscarred, but real. And their reality is often the very thing that gives life to others. We often want transformation to be a moment, a flash of divine intervention that instantly makes us whole, but more often it is a process, a slow burning, a dismantling and rebuilding that takes time, silence, and trust. The pain you are in may not be lifted all at once, but something is happening within you, even if you do not see it, especially if you do not see it, for growth is often invisible until long after the storm has passed. So if you find yourself in the dark, do not rush to escape it. Do not curse it too quickly. Instead, ask what it might be preparing you for. Ask what might be planted there beneath the surface, waiting to rise in time. You are not being forgotten. You are being formed. The hands that hold you are not idle. They are shaping something eternal. And in time, though perhaps not today, and perhaps not soon, you will look back on this night and see it not only as the moment of your breaking, but as the beginning of your becoming. Darkness is not the end of the story. It is the place where the roots grow, and what God grows in you, there may be the very thing that shines the brightest when the dawn finally comes. There exists a common misunderstanding about faith, that it is some kind of spiritual anesthesia, a divine numbing that removes all fear, doubt, or trembling. But that idea crumbles in the face of real life. When tragedy strikes, when dreams unravel, when the night grows long, and God feels painfully silent, we do not feel brave, we feel broken. We do not feel fearless, we feel afraid, and yet it is precisely in these moments that faith reveals its true character. For faith, at its core, is not the denial of fear. It is the decision to move forward in spite of it. We are taught to admire those who stand boldly, without hesitation, eyes fixed and hearts steady. And certainly, there is something noble about strength. But the kind of faith that pleases God is not the confidence that never quivers. It is the quiet, trembling step taken when every nerve screams to turn back. If fear were incompatible with faith, then most of our greatest heroes in history would be disqualified. The man who built an ark when no rain had fallen, the woman who hid spies under threat of death, the prophet who fled to the wilderness in despair, the disciple who stepped onto the waves, none of these were free from fear. But they acted anyway, and that is what makes them great. Faith is not some magical certainty that silences all questions. It is the willingness to hold your questions in one hand and the hand of God in the other, and walk anyway. It does not promise the absence of storms, but it does promise the presence of the one who speaks peace in the middle of them. And even when he does not calm the winds around you, he can calm the chaos within you. We often believe that if we were stronger, we would feel more sure. But the paradox of faith is that it grows in the soil of weakness. The very things we think disqualify us, our fear, our hesitation, our fragile hope, are often the materials God uses most powerfully. A heart that knows its own frailty is far more useful than one that boasts in its strength, because when you know how easily you could collapse, you cling more tightly to the one who holds you up. To trust God does not mean you don't tremble. It means you keep walking even as you tremble. It means you choose to believe that He is with you, even when you cannot see Him or feel Him. It means that, though your heart pounds, though your knees shake, you still place one foot in front of the other and say, I don't know where this is going, but I know who is leading me. That is the essence of courage, not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be ruled by it. We tend to think of faith as something bright and triumphant, and at times it is, but more often it is hidden, quiet, dimly lit. It takes the form of whispered prayers through sleepless nights, of silent endurance through painful seasons, of small acts of obedience when nothing seems to be changing. It is not showy, it is not loud, but it is steady, and it is precious. Fear will come. It is not a failure to feel it. The failure comes only when fear stops us from stepping forward at all. God never demanded that we be unafraid. He simply invites us to trust Him more than our fear. And that is a trust built not on emotion, but on character. His character, on the unchanging truth that, though the way may be unclear, the one who leads you is not. You may not feel brave. That is no matter. Bravery is not a feeling. It is a choice. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply to wake up, breathe, and try again. That counts, that matters, because it says, even in your trembling, I am not giving up. So if you find yourself afraid today, do not shame yourself. You are in good company, but don't let fear have the final word. Speak faith in its presence. Move your feet, even if your heart is heavy. Cry out, even if your voice shakes. The God who calls you is not looking for perfect performance. He is looking for trust, and trust is often born in the space between fear and action. Remember, the size of your faith is not measured by the absence of fear, but by your willingness to walk through fear, believing that God is with you. He is not waiting for you to become fearless. He is walking with you in your fear, calling you forward one trembling step at a time. There is something in us that longs for certainty. We crave the full map, the master plan, the blueprint of what lies ahead. We do not simply want to know that things will be all right. We want to know how they will be all right. We do not simply want to be told that God is guiding us. We want to be shown the entire path before we take the first step. But God, in His wisdom, rarely gives us what we want in this regard. Instead, He gives us what we need, and what we need more often than not is not a map, but a lantern. God's guidance is not typically like standing on a mountaintop where you can see the end from the beginning. More often, it is like walking through a forest in the fog. The next few steps are visible. Beyond that, everything fades into mystery, and this, we discover, is not a flaw in His guidance, but a feature of it. It is precisely in this dimness, in this partial illumination, that faith becomes necessary. If we could see everything at once, we would rely on sight, but God is after something deeper than sight. He is after trust. One might ask why the Creator of all things, who could reveal the future in dazzling clarity if he wished, would choose to lead us this way, by inches and moments, by turns we did not expect and roads we would not have chosen. But this, too, is part of his love, for if he gave us the whole story at once, we would be overwhelmed, or worse, we would be tempted to take control of it. But when he gives it to us piece by piece, he is inviting us into relationship rather than autonomy. We walk with him not merely toward an outcome. Each small step becomes sacred in this way. The quiet decision to show up again, the hard choice to forgive, the risk of speaking truth, the courage to begin something new, even when you feel unready. These are not insignificant. They are the very fabric of God's unfolding will. You may not understand how each step fits into the larger picture. You may wonder what it is all for, but that is not your burden to bear. The call is not to understand the whole plan. The call is to take the next faithful step. It is a humbling thing to live this way, to not know where it all leads, to admit that you are not in control. But in that humility, something beautiful is born. A deeper dependence on the one who sees beyond every curve in the road. His knowledge of your path is not theoretical. It is personal, intimate. He knows what you do not. He sees the obstacles ahead, the detours you will take, the strength you will need. And so, when he only gives you a step at a time, it is not because he is withholding. It is because he is caring for you more gently than you know. Sometimes the next step is small, sometimes it is a step back, sometimes it is a pause. We often confuse delay with disapproval, but God's timing is rarely aligned with our urgency. What feels like a detour may in fact be a divine reorientation. What feels like a step into the unknown may be a doorway into deeper trust. And what feels like silence may not be God's absence, but his quiet presence teaching you to listen in new ways. There is something holy about this kind of journey. It produces a particular kind of person, not hurried, not overly self-assured, but anchored. Such a person is not driven by ambition or fear, but by a quiet confidence that they are being led even when they do not know the way. And over time, they come to see that the path itself, not just the destination, has been filled with grace. You may be standing at a crossroads now, unsure which way to go. You may be surrounded by fog, desperate for clarity. You may feel lost, even abandoned, but the truth is, you are not alone. The one who leads you does not expect you to see the end. He only asks you to follow him into the next moment, the next choice, the next step. And he will meet you there, so take the next step, even if it is small, even if it feels uncertain, even if your hands tremble and your heart is unsure. God does not promise to show us the whole path, but he does promise to be faithful along the way, and that, in the end, is more than enough. It is one of the more difficult things to believe, especially when you are sitting in the rubble of something once precious, that the pain you feel is not meaningless. In the sharp ache of loss, in the heavy silence of disappointment, in the weary disorientation of grief, it is hard to imagine that anything of value could possibly come from such ruin. And yet, this is the mysterious work of God, not merely to comfort us in our sorrow, but to transform our sorrow into something that matters. We tend to think of purpose as something tied to clarity and success. It seems incompatible with suffering. When life goes according to plan, we speak easily of blessing and calling. But when plans collapse and nothing makes sense, we assume we've strayed from the path. That assumption, however, is not consistent with the reality of divine redemption, for the truth is this: God's purposes are often hidden within what we would rather avoid, and his greatest work in us often begins where our own strength ends. There is a great difference between wounds and waste. Wounds we all have, some visible, some secret, but whether they become waste or wonder depends on what we do with them, or rather, what we allow God to do through them. Pain in itself does not produce growth, but pain surrender Pain placed into the hands of the one who knows how to shape it can become the beginning of something deeply meaningful. There is no suffering so great that God cannot use it. There is no darkness so thick that he cannot weave light through it. He does not erase the hard chapters of your story, he repurposes them. That does not make the pain good. It does not deny the reality of injustice or sorrow. But it does mean the pain is not wasted, not when placed in the hands of God. Think of those moments in your life that have shaped you the most. Were they not the ones that brought you to your knees? The moments where you ran out of answers, where the mask fell, where you were forced to be honest about your need. It is often through what breaks us that we become who we were truly meant to be, not in spite of our pain, but through it. For it is in our weakest moments that we are invited into the deepest transformation. God does not delight in your suffering, but he does delight in what he can bring out of it, a deeper empathy, a softer heart, a kind of wisdom that cannot be taught, only earned. You begin to see people differently. You speak more gently. You become the kind of person who can sit with others in their pain without offering shallow solutions. That is a rare gift, and it is one forged in the fire of real sorrow. We often imagine that purpose is something distant, a future accomplishment we must chase down. But what if purpose is not something waiting at the end of our journey, but something being formed in the very struggle we're in? What if the tears you've cried, the prayers you've whispered through clenched teeth, the courage it took simply to get out of bed, what if that is the substance of purpose? Not a detour, not a delay, but the exact place where God is forming something eternal in you. He is not only the God of outcomes, he is the God of process. He does not just meet you at the finish line. He walks with you through every valley, and he collects every tear along the way. Nothing you have suffered is unseen. Nothing you have lost is forgotten, and nothing you have endured is beyond his power to redeem. Your pain may never make perfect sense from this side of eternity. Some questions will remain unanswered. But this much is certain, the story is not over, and in God's hands even broken pieces can be used to build something beautiful, not only for you but for others. The comfort you receive becomes comfort you can give. The healing you find becomes hope you can offer. The very things that nearly broke you become the very things that equip you to love more deeply and live more honestly. Do not believe the lie that your pain has ruined your life. It may have changed it. It may have shattered illusions and forced you to start again, but it has not ruined it. With God, nothing is beyond repair, nothing is beyond use. Even your greatest pain can be given purpose. And though you may not yet see the full picture, you can trust that it is being painted by hands that waste nothing, not even the tears you hoped you'd never have to cry. There is a difference, an important one, between hope and mere optimism. Optimism is often tied to circumstance. It whispers things are going to work out, but only because it assumes the conditions will improve. Hope, on the other hand, is made of sterner stuff. Hope does not depend on how the winds blow or whether the skies clear. It is not rooted in favorable odds or positive feelings. True hope can outlast storms because it does not look to the weather, but to the one who commands it. Hope is not a denial of pain. It does not pretend that suffering is pleasant or that heartache does not ache. In fact, the people who know the deepest kind of hope are often those who have walked through the darkest valleys. And they do not hope because they are blind to despair. They hope because, in the midst of despair, they have seen enough of God to know this: the story is not over. To hope is to trust that God's silence is not absence. It is to believe that even in the unanswered questions and unfinished chapters of your life, he is still writing. Sometimes the plot takes a turn you never wanted. Sometimes the ink smears and the pages tear. But still he writes, still he redeems, still he shapes every sorrow and shadow into a narrative that is not yet complete. It is tempting to believe that hope is something you either feel or you don't. But more often, hope is something you choose. It is the quiet defiance of despair, the decision to keep your soul open to the possibility of redemption. Even when everything in you is tempted to close up, give in, or grow bitter, hope stands at the door and whispers, "Not yet. This isn't the end." We must be careful not to reduce hope to mere cheerfulness. There is nothing superficial about real hope. It is not a sunny quote on a poster or a hollow phrase thrown at someone in pain. Real hope has been through the fire. It has cried itself to sleep. It has whispered prayers into the void, and still it has risen again, because real hope does not stand on shaky ground. It stands on the character of God. If God is who he says he is, faithful, loving, sovereign, near, then hope is not a gamble, it is a response. It is not wishful thinking, but confident expectation, not because we know what the future holds, but because we know who holds it. And because we know this, we can face each day not with naive confidence, but with courageous trust. Hope does not always shout. More often it is a quiet strength, a flicker rather than a blaze, but a flicker can keep you warm through the night. A flicker can outlast the storm. It is enough, and it is precious. You may not feel full of hope today, but if there is even a small spark within you, a stubborn belief that God is still working, that he has not left you, that something good can still come from all of this, then you possess something of immeasurable worth. What makes hope holy is that it lifts our eyes above the immediate. It teaches us to live not just in reaction to what is seen, but in anticipation of what is unseen. It says, "I do not yet understand, but I believe understanding will come." It says, "The pain is real, but so is the promise." It says, "The tomb may be sealed today, but the stone will roll away." Hope is not easy. It is an act of courage. It is choosing to believe in gardens after winters, in mornings after nights, in joy that will return even if now it seems lost forever. This does not mean pretending everything is fine. It means knowing that, in time, by God's grace, it can be well again even if that time is not today. And so we hold on, not because we see the ending, but because we trust the author. We walk forward even if only by inches, trusting that God is not finished yet. He is still at work in you, through you, beyond you, even now, even here. Hope is not soft. It is not naive. It is the soul's anchor in the fiercest storm, not because the storm is small, but because God is greater. It is the defiant conviction that even our hardest moments are not final chapters. The pen is still moving, and the hand that holds it is faithful. Tools,